Hey everyone, I've been working on a new werewolf tank build for a while. I've done ones in the past and I felt they were good, but they were very DPS focused and didn't help the group much, and I really wasn't happy with it. I think I've finally put together a build that's a good balance of tanking, support, and DPS to carry pretty much any pug group through a dungeon, either it be on normal or veteran, or even on most DLCs. Now, I still need to tweak a few things and test a few more, but for the most part, I think this build is ready to share. So this is going to be what I call the rushing Agony werewolf tank. I showed a video on it in the past, but didn't go through a breakdown of how I achieved it. Now, I do have two different characters for this build. One is a Khajiit and one is an Orc. I'll explain why in a moment, but first off, let me show you how this works. How this build works is you pounce, and this will cause Rushing Agony to yank in 5 mobs. Immediately Fear then prevent them from moving. Rushing Agony will then explode, doing AoE damage. Then use Claws of Life, and this should trigger Storm Fist. For my stats, I have 16k Magicka, 31k health, 32k stamina. I was trying to stay about the 30k health mark for this character. That's kind of the minimum I think you should have for a tank, in my opinion. My weapon damage, you can see 52 or 54-24. Crit is kind of low. I might change that a little bit. And my penetration is 51-61. Now, you'll notice my spell and physical resistance is kind of low. 22-487. In my opinion, that's low for a tank. You should have about 32k, in my opinion. Now, remember the Tormentor thing, how it buffs you when you use it? Basically, anytime you pounce to aggro, which should be all the time, you should have aggro, this should be buffing you. So let me show you what it does. So if we run over to, let's say, this boss here, or not boss, but mob here. Okay, and now let's take a look at my defense. So now I'm at about 26k, which is significantly better than what it was a minute ago. And while it's still not the best, it still works out for most things for this type of character. So this is how I have my gear set up for this build. First off, you're going to need 3 different sets. You need the Tormentor set, which gets you aggro. You need Rushing Agony, which is the gear that pulls the mobs in. And then the 2-piece is kind of optional, but I like Storm Fist because it's a good AoE. Now let me explain how it works. First off, you have Tormentor. So if you look at the stats I have here, maximum health, good for a tank. Good healing, adds 4% healing, 4% healing again. More good stats for a tank, makes you easy to heal. And when this is the tank skill, or the aggro skill right here. When you deal direct damage with a charge, leap, teleport, or pull ability, you gain 35, 57 physical and spell resistance, and you taunt the enemy to attack you for 15 seconds. So this is what gives the ability for a werewolf to taunt. If you've ever seen a werewolf tanking in a dungeon, this is how they're doing it. So, good set for that. So for my main hand, I am using a sword. And I have not, the enchantment I haven't really played with. I need to mess with that more. I do have it as Nirnhoned, so I can do 15% more weapon damage. And then I have a shield for my offhand. Once again, the enchantment, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it yet. But I do have it set as infused, so increase my armor enchantment effect by 25%. I may go tri-stat on this, I think. Okay, so that is Tormentor. I use that on my weapons and down on my jewelry. So for the enchantment on that, I do a weapon damage enchantment, and I do infuse, so I can do more damage. And I have that on all 3 of them. Now I also, for really easy dungeons, I will do axe and dagger, just so I can do more DPS. Once again, these are Nirnhoned and then precise. So that's what I got for the Tormentor set. Alright, so what I was saying for the second set, I use Storm Fist. I use the Multi-Infect enchantment, just so I can have more Magicka, health, and stamina. And then I have it Divines. Now I do have Divines for all my armor pieces, except shoulders, which I need to fix. But yeah, that is it for everything. I use heavy armor for the 2 pieces, because I do need a little bit of armor, because you are a little squishy with the way I'm doing this. So yeah, shoulders and head, both heavy. All right, next setup. Yeah, and I did explain this one for the Storm Fist. Another reason I like it, you got the stamina recovery for slot number 1. And then, as I was saying, it's a good AoE skill. When you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create a Thunderfish to crush the enemy, dealing 1573 shock damage every 1 second for 3 seconds to all enemies within 4 meters, and a final 15k physical damage when the fist closes. And this can happen once every 8 seconds, and of course scales off your higher of your weapon or spell damage. Okay, and now the last piece, or last set of gear, the one that I really enjoyed, is Rushing Agony. Now, I did this set all medium armor. So chest, waist, hands, legs, and feet, all medium, to help with the extra weapon damage from the medium armor passives. So we got multi-effect enchantment also with divines on all the pieces. Now, here's why I like Rushing Agony. You got the stamina recovery, which is nice, weapon and spell damage, and then you have offensive penetration. And then last one, when you deal direct damage with a blink, charge, leap, teleport, or pull ability, you pull enemies within 10 meters to you. After 2 seconds, you deal 10k, well, about 10k, physical damage to all enemies within 7 meters. This effect can occur once every 8 seconds and scales off the higher of your weapon or spell damage. This is kind of like Dark Convergence, just not quite as good in my opinion, but it works well for melee attacks. That is pretty much it for my gear sets. For champion points, I'm not going to go over every point I used, but I will cover the ones I slotted, since from my experience, even if you copy the best DPS or tank build in the game, it really just comes down to your own personal play style. So, for champion points, what I slotted in Warfare, I have Wrathful Strikes, which increases your weapon and spell damage, which is what I'm going for in this build. And then I went for Ironclad for tanking, because this reduces the damage you take from direct damage attacks by 2% per stage, so that ends up at 10%. Duelist Rebuff reduces the damage taken by single target attacks by 2% per stage, so this is pretty helpful when it comes to bosses. And then Endless Endurance, just because I am not good at resource management, so extra stamina is always good for me. This is why you see a lot of stamina recovery on this build. So if you're good at that, there's lots of other choices you can go with, but that's personally how I went with Warfare. So going over to fitness, I used Peace of Mind, so this increases your magicka and health recovery while under the effects of crowd control immunity by 40 per stage, so 200 health and magicka recovery. Rejuvenation grants 1.8 health, magicka, and stamina recovery per stage, so that's 90. Fortified grants 34.6 armor per stage, so that's an extra 1731 armor. And Boundless Vitality, which grants 28 max health per stage, so that's 1400 max health. And then finally we have what's it called? I forget what this one's called. Crafting. Honestly, this one really doesn't matter much. None of these really affect the way you actually tank a dungeon. But personally, I have Treasure Hunter, Rationeer, Liquid Efficiency, and Meticulous Disassembly. For my attributes for this build, I just went ahead and did everything into stamina. Because I am relatively low on stamina, at least for a werewolf or trying to DPS. My Mundus Stone, I chose the Shadow. Now, this is probably going to change to the Thief. I believe the Thief actually raises your crit chance number, like your percentage of time you do a crit. Because there's no point in having a high crit number if you never actually crit. So, I might change that. For food, I used the Trifle Pocket. This increases your health and your stamina recovery. Once again, as you've kind of seen in this build, I'm not really great at stamina management, and it's just easier for me to have that recovery and just have stamina going all the time. So this way, I pretty much never have to worry about running out of stamina. I can spam skills all day, and I'm just fine. Everything else is all just, buffs you get just from being Werewolf. For other buffs or skills, so what I chose, first off, I did choose Nightblade, because once again, you have skills like Refreshing Shadows, that's a passive that increases your health, stamina, and magicka recovery by 15%. And then for my race, I went ahead and chose Khajiit. First off, just because I like Khajiit, and second off, they have a couple good skills for DPS. You also have increase your health recovery by 100 and your stamina and magicka recovery by 100. Once again, more recovery. You have your Lunar Blessing, which increases your maximum health, magicka, and stamina. And then you have Feline Ambush, which increases your critical damage and critical healing by 12%. This is more of a pure DPS skill, but hey, it doesn't hurt in this build at all. So let's take a look at my actual skills I use while I'm in Werewolf. So for my choices, first off, I have Pack Leader. Pack Leader is much better for tanking because you get decreased by 10% damage you take. You also summon 2 direwolves. And you also grant yourself and nearby allies minor courage, increasing their weapon and spell damage by 215. So you're helping the whole group by buffing them basically with that. And then the 2 direwolves, they play into letting you stay in Werewolf longer with the passive Call of the Pack, which reduces the cost of remaining in your werewolf transformation by 20% for each transformed werewolf or direwolf in your group. So, Pack Leader is definitely the one you want to go for if you're tanking. Now, as far as my active abilities go, I chose Brutal Pounce. It's literally just a better DPS skill over the other one. The other morph allows you to stay in werewolf longer when you pounce, but it really doesn't matter. You never run out of werewolf in this with the 2 direwolves with you. The next one I chose was Hircine's Fortitude. Now, I chose that one because it increases your health and stamina recovery by a small amount of the healing cost. The other one, if you do Hircine's Rage, it casts at full health. You gain Major Berserk for a short duration after casting, but it also increases the damage you take. And as a tank, you're probably not going to have your health at full all the time anyway, so it's kind of hard to use. Next one I chose was Ferocious Roar. Now, the reason I chose this one is, once again, because stamina issues. Now, this morph, your heavy attacks are 33% faster for 10 seconds after casting. So let's say you're low on stamina. You cast the Roar skill, and then you hold down that heavy attack button, and you've gotten your stamina back in a couple seconds, just all the way. It works out very well. Next skill, Howl of Despair. This one will give you a synergy that does Feeding Frenzy, which gives your allies Empower for 5 seconds, increasing their damage done with light and heavy attacks. So once again, you are benefiting the group by giving them a synergy. And then the last one is I chose Claws of Life, just because it is a heal skill, another heal skill that helps you if the healer can't for whatever reason, or just want to help keep your health up without having to howl all the time to heal yourself. Other than that, choose all the passives, and that is pretty much everything. Lastly, I have my Sword and Shield skills. Now, you're probably not going to use these too often because you're going to be in Werewolf, but just in case, I'm using Ransack, basically just your aggro skill that also does Major Breach, reducing the physical and spell resistance on the enemy. Your other skill I got, Shielded Assault. I really like having a gap closer, so only reason I have that. Razor Caltrops, this is a PvP skill, so you might have to level up your PvP and you need to do that. Basically just an AoE that gives Major Breach to the enemies and slows them down. Then I have Bone Shield. I believe that is an Undaunted skill, I want to say. You surround yourself with the world ones, gaining a damage shield that absorbs around 10k damage for 6 seconds, and this ability scales off your max health. And then lastly, another PvP skill, Resolving Vigor 4, heals yourself for about 15k over 4 seconds. So that is my Sword and Shield. My my dagger and axe. I always like having a gap closer, so I use Ambush. Now this skill also works as an aggro skill because it's basically a leap, and it does also trigger Rushing Agony. So you can literally tank with it like this. Next skill is Whirling Blades, or as I like to call it, Spin to Win. Basically just spin and hit everything around you. Next one, Surprise Attack. kind of the must-have skill for a Nightblade. Just a quick attack that does a lot of damage. Deadly Cloak, just a way to give yourself a little bit of resistance and doing DPS to other mobs at the same time. And then lastly, this one's kind of whatever you want it to be. I chose Shrouded Daggers because when you throw it, you set up mobs off balance and you gain Major Brutality, increasing your weapon damage by 20% for 20 seconds. And then, of course, Pack Leader is my ultimate. The only other skills I really have on here are just passives. Basically, your class passives, max them out if you can. No reason not to. They benefit you regardless. Yeah, one-hand and shield, I have them all maxed out. Dual wield, all maxed out. Now, just take in mind, though, these skills, these passives do not affect your weapon passives do not affect you when you're in Werewolf, so it does not matter. It's just when you're not in Werewolf, they can still be effective. Light armor, I don't have anything. Medium armor, I got everything. Heavy armor, everything. And that is pretty much it. Pretty much if you can afford the skills, get them. There's no reason not to on the passives. So for my other build that I talked about, not much has changed. Instead of Khajiit, I chose an Orc, and the reason for that is Orc has a few more skills that are kind of better for tanking in my opinion. So if you go ahead and take a look at the Orc skills, you got Brawny, which increases your max stamina by 1,000. You have Unflinching Rage, which increases your max health by 1,000. And when you deal damage, you heal for 2167. This is great when you're tanking. And then on top of that, you also have Swift Warrior, which gives you a weapon and spell damage increase of 258. It also does reduces the cost of sprint and increases the movement speed of sprint. I don't really care too much about that. But those other skills I think are really great for tanking, and honestly, Orc is pretty much one of the better classes in the game in my opinion. As far as skills go, everything else is exactly the same. Champion points are the same. The only real difference is your attribute points, which I went with 38 in health and 26 for stamina. Now I did that just so you can see the stats here. I got about 38k health and about 33k stamina. My recovery is not nearly as good as my other character. It's only 1381. My weapon damage is much lower, and my crit is a little bit higher, but that is because on this character I actually do have the Thief Mundus Stone like I was talking about doing. I also run Bewitched Sugar Skulls for that maximum health, stamina, and magicka, and health recovery, which is good for tank. And let me show you, right now we have 28,335 for our defense. Let me show you what happens when I actually pounce and get the extra. So I do that, and now I have almost 32k on the dot's physical and spell resistance, which, like I was saying, in my opinion, is kind of what you want for a werewolf tank, or for any tank in general. So the only other things I really did different is if we take a look at my armor, I kind of swapped things around. So once again, I still have kind of the same things here. Actually, I have Rushing Agony now on my main hand, my offhand, and then on my accessories, because these are medium armor sets. So if I want to achieve better defense, I got to put them on something that's not going to affect my, my heavy or medium armor. So putting it on these, it doesn't matter. So for my main hand, I used a sword, and I did the defending enchantment the defending, I can't think what it's called, but it does the increased physical and spell resistance by 1638, which helps quite a bit. And then my offhand, I chose Infused, so that way, and then I did a tri-stat, so I can get as many enchantments, or as many as stats as I can for my health, magicka, and stamina. And then, like I was saying, I switched things around. My Stormfist is the same. I got that as heavy. Shoulders, it's also heavy. Basically, everything on my body is heavy now. Nothing is medium like my other character. So, for my chest, I now have Tormentor on that. On the waist also, hands, legs, and feet. And you noticed all of these have the tri-stat enchantment. But for my smaller pieces like the feet, hands, waist, and shoulders, I all have divines. But for the bigger pieces like head, chest, and legs, I did the infused. That way you get more stats out of it, basically. And I think that's kind of better when you're trying to maximize stats, in my opinion. So that's pretty much the difference between the two builds. This one, I've done vet DLCs, I've done everything. I've had no problem with this character at all. The only problem I kind of run into is stamina. It is kind of hard to maintain it on this character. As you saw, my character does not have much stamina regen, only 1381. That might change a little bit, because if you look at my rings and necklace, I have weapon damage, but then I have stamina recovery, but it's only a blue right now. So I'll get a little bit more stamina recovery, but not much. So those are basically my builds for my Werewolf Rushing Agony tank. If you think there's anything I could do to improve it, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching the video, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.